A week after Cyclone Gabrielle hit and nearly a month after the floods, North Islanders are experiencing rain-anxiety, that nervous feeling every time it rains. It's a familiar feeling for Cantabrians who are about to mark the 12th anniversary of the earthquakes that killed 185 people and injured thousands. So what advice can Southerners offer their cousins up north?
This is not going to fix itself in a few months or even maybe a few years. So my advice would be realistic about how long it's going to take you to get back to where you would consider it to be normal. When we felt an aftershock, it's almost a learned response. It's something that you can't stop. Every little aftershock, many of us went, oh, is it going to be followed by a big one? So the anxieties are similar, I think, and I totally get that. Don't underestimate the effect that this is going to have on mental health, on mental well-being, physical well-being, and your children. You know, again, learn the lessons from Christchurch and Canterbury.
Photographer Tim Failing captured the city's red zone after the quakes.
One of the great things about the post-earthquake environment in Christchurch initially is that people, they banded together and helped one another get through things. I think if I could give any advice is to try and sustain those sorts of relationships and ties after the cleanup, making you really aware and appreciative of the community that remains.
Well, joining us now for a bit more on this is clinical psychologist Kirsty Ross. And Kirsty, you've just written a piece about the trauma of natural disasters. Do you think people who've gone through this cyclone are experiencing this? And what sort of symptoms might they be seeing?
Yeah, so what happens after a disaster like this is a high proportion of the population will have an acute stress response, and that's really just as a consequence of being through such a really traumatic experience. And that involves things like having difficulty sleeping. It can mean having trouble concentrating and remembering things because your brain's really occupied with keeping you safe and watching out for any signs of threat. And also people can feel really hyped up, quite on edge. And that can actually show up in a number of different ways, high levels of energy or actually high levels of emotion can show up as well.
For people who recognise themselves in what you're talking about tonight, any advice for those who are struggling?
Absolutely. So remember that emotions are really physical experiences. So care for your body first and foremost. Sleep wherever you can. Rest is really important. Hydrate, eat as well as you can. And I guess make space for all emotions. You know, no emotion is going to be a problem right now. So don't deny yourself how you're feeling.
Having said that, should we try and hide some of it from our kids? Is it okay to show these emotions in front of our kids?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Kids need to know that emotions are okay. They need to know that if they're feeling fearful or if they're feeling distressed, that actually that is a normal reaction. So kids look to adults for what's the normal kind of way to feel, or is it okay if I'm feeling this way? What's important is for them to see the adults remaining in control. It's fine to sit down with your kids and say, gosh, I'm so sad about our house. I'm so sad this is happening, and to have a cry, and for the kids to see that actually you've maintained control, that you're what we call regulated.
So, Kirsty, for those of us who may have friends or family who are going through this, is there anything that we can do to help and support them?
Yeah, the temptation that people often have is to ask them all about what's happened, to be supportive from a really good place. That's not always the most helpful thing to do. If you're trying to support someone that's been through a trauma, just listen. Just actually let people talk to you in their own time. Don't try and force people to talk about what's happened because they may not be ready. But just saying, I'm here for whatever you need, I'm here to listen when you're ready is also really important.
Well, Kirsty, thank you so much for chatting to us about this.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
So I Actually, I was thinking about this the other day, and I actually think I have a little bit of like that rain anxiety that Kirsty was talking about. Because like when I was driving to my gig on the Friday night that the big flood happened
in Auckland,
I was like, I got genuinely stuck in like pretty high water, and like now whenever it rains, I'm genuinely like really worried that like I'll have to drive through water like that again.
There's a lot of that going around. It was the word rain anxiety.
Yeah.
And with more due this coming weekend.
Yeah. And I'm just like,
hopefully not so heavily in the East Coast, but worth taking those tips on board, yeah.
Yeah, I just can't imagine, like, that was like such a small experience on my behalf, but I can't imagine how much harder it is for the people who like really went through it, you know.